Hello, everybody. This should give you a clue as to what kind of episode this is. Did you hear that? Did that come through? I am with Dadpressions, Paul Malowitz. I pronounced that right?
It was close. Malowitz.
Malowitz. Okay, Malowitz. Um, if you guys remember, Paul was on before. Paul is a former comedian, or still. I mean, you're once a comedian, always a comedian. Um, but Bitcoiner, but also worked in the movie world and all that kind of stuff. If you want to check out that episode, it's a ways back, and his Twitter handle is Dadpressions. Um, but this one's just kind of a hang. We're gonna be sitting here, like you heard the beer crack. We're gonna be sitting here shooting the breeze about Bitcoin and what's going on at the moment, and anything that comes in between. And but before I get into that, get a Bitbox O2 hardware wallet. Go to bitbox.swiss/Bitcoin made simple and use the promo code Bitcoin made simple to get 5% off. Did that all in one take. There we go. So, Paul, how are you?
I'm doing well. That was one take too.
Well, what kind of beer are you drinking?
I am drinking a Founder's Solid Gold beer. It's a
Oh,
Michigan beer, which is where I am.
Michigan. I've got Firehouse Red Ale.
Ooh, that looks good
Um,
too.
it's from the Pittsburgh area. I gotta I like to stick with the local brews
Yeah.
as much as possible. Um, but yeah, so the Bitcoin stuff we were talking about, like I was saying how like Bitcoin is just kind of like lame at the moment. Um, and I mean not Bitcoin itself, but like I think
The
I don't know if you
discussion
get this
around.
feeling. Yeah, it's just like I feel like it's like on everything's on repeat. Um,
Yeah.
which
It's
everyone knows that's why I've like kind of pivoted the podcast to like, okay, I'm not going to be another place that's just doing interviews that you heard elsewhere. And like the interviews, I think are getting like repetitive where, you're just like, like, I don't know. I mean, was there something new there?
yeah, I usually can just read from the description and you're like, oh, okay, I know that guy is gonna say the thing about the stuff. And then yeah, I've been skipping a lot more or just like 3xing listening to like something while I do the dishes and stuff. I mean, it seems like everybody's sort of just dug in their little trench and people are having, like I can't remember if we can swear on the show or not.
Oh, yeah. You can say
Yeah,
whatever you want.
people are just having shit fights over the same stuff, and then like, it's like go to my Substack or like, oh, look what Peter Schiff's kid said because he's crazy. And it's like, well, he's an 18-year-old kid and he's trying to get attention. He's got your attention. Or it's like, hey, we're gonna have some conference in Malta and everybody should go like to Malta. And like, there's a lot of nice people that are probably in Malta. I got nothing against people that get to go to Malta, but I'm in my basement with my poor lighting, and I'm just trying to be a guy, got a family, got a kid,
Yeah.
similar to you.
Like, we just can't get up and go to Malta, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
And like, well, this is going to sound, I'm not being like super critical, but like, I don't know if you saw like Sam Callahan, I think is his name, is dating like Natalie Brunell, and that came out on
Oh, I think I did see that.
and then like they were posting like their vacation pics and stuff like that, and I'm like I just had this thought, so I'm not Natalie or Sam, I'm not critiquing you because I remember pre-kids, like when my wife and I would go on trips, like it was like Facebook. We would just plow all that stuff onto Facebook and be like, look at this. We're in the Alps, like on the edge of a mountain. And now I'm like, I'm so far removed from that
I know.
where I'm like, I don't want anyone to know where I am ever. Like
No,
it's like
you
I'm
froze up or I froze up.
can you hear me?
Sorry. Are you
No, no.
still there?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah,
Um
I don't want anybody to know what's going on with me, like in terms of like, hey, I've got a couple like t-shirts that say Bitcoin because like my family would be like, you like Bitcoin, here's a t-shirt. And I'm like, I'm not gonna wear that in public and get jumped with a wrench. You
Oh
know,
yeah, you're
I'm not
just
one of those
asking for it.
taekwondo guys that is like a whole faction of Bitcoin.
Yeah.
I'm like, my kid's got a swimming lesson, and I used to like be athletic in high school, but that was a long time ago, kind of guys.
Yeah, which is to say that you're a dad.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
you're just like, oh, I used to be able to hang. Um, like, yeah, it's just like, I don't know. The Bitcoin Twitter has just been weird. Like, and I can't bless their souls. I don't know how the people that have to do it do those swan spaces every day. Like, I see it, all the time on Twitter. It's like every day there is a swan space, and I'm like, what are we talking about? You
It's
know?
it's impressive to have a beachhead daily. I listen to it sometimes, and there's some smart people on there, but yeah, like it gets to be like it's a lot of content to go through over and over. It seems like instead of Bitcoin is Venice, Bitcoin is high school is starting to be how things are.
Yeah,
It's like who's dating who, what are your Instagram photos, who's in a shit fight with
yeah.
who.
Who's
Unfortunate.
who's against who? Like, where people will be like, I see people like talk down about Strike, and I'm like, oh, do we like hate Jock Maulers now, or we love them? Like, what? I, like, not saying that that's how we like. I go along with the group, but it's like
Yeah, it's
it seems that there's that you can see the factions where it's like, okay, like this is a little juvenile, um, but like again, like I don't know, but I guess maybe the Bitcoin, like I guess the Swan stuff and like all the entry level stuff, it's like I guess if you look at it through the perspective that we have to have that for a for all the newbies coming through.
yeah, I mean, I think they're doing great work at like always being a place where somebody new can go to, and then they try to keep that podcast as educational to young people as possible. But because it's like kind of the same people um every day, at the beginning it turns into like kind of a bro hangout of them knowing each other, which is just natural, like dynamically speaking, for a program like
Mm-hmm.
that. And then Alex will be like, oh, we got to like answer questions for like somebody that's doesn't know anything about Bitcoin. He does a good job getting the back on track. I think he's a really good host. But
Yeah,
yeah,
no, I'm not at all. I'm
no, I
just
don't think
like
you are. But
I
just
don't
saying.
think I could do that. Um, because I like, speaking of like dad things, sitting there with other dads at some event, and Bitcoin came up or whatever, and like I think I was explaining something, and whatever I was explaining, I had to mention that I had this Bitcoin podcast, and they were like, oh, I don't even know anything about Bitcoin, and I was like, yeah, I was like, there was a time where I would have sat here and wanted to talk to you about it for the next 20 minutes.
Yep.
um I was like, but I'm in this place. I was like, but if you're not ready to talk about it, then you're not ready, and I'm okay with that. Like,
Yeah, and I think that's actually a good and a sign of maturity too, because I mean, I used to be, oh, let me tell you all this stuff. And that's basically just like the whole, why don't you love me? Like
mm-hmm.
nobody ever like found a long-lasting relationship with like, why don't you love me tactics.
Yeah, yeah,
At this point, you just got to let people come to you and, make it apparent that you're interested in it. And I mean, it's going to play out.
yeah, and like I think I've just learned. Is this? I forget whenever we originally talked. Is this your second bear market?
Um, I guess, yeah. I was 2016 is when I started. So I guess
Okay.
not quite second. There's been a lot of weird stuff, but in terms of like kind of knowing and feeling the cycle, it would probably be the second one.
Yeah,
I got a little bit when FTX went down, which was great. And it
you
was
got
just
what?
I got some Bitcoin when Bitcoin dumped because of FTX.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it was like I was like a PA in Los Angeles. So I did not get very much because it was just like do we have any to spare? But I was like, I know this is the best idea ever. And then,
Oh,
but yeah, this,
wait, do you mean Mount Gox?
there was Mt. Gox, and then
Because the FTX was just the
I'm
thing
sorry,
that.
not FTX, Bitfinex.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Bitfinex. Yeah,
Yep.
and that it like dipped to like 350 or something like that. And I think that those were the people that ended up getting busted, like the girl rapper.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, but
Um.
so yeah, but this cyclically, it feels like the second one because at first just everything was weird.
Yeah. Yeah. This is a different time. I'm wondering, like, trying to like analyze myself, like thinking about the Bitcoiners that had been through a full cycle during like the bull run and like how I perceived them. And I was like, I kind of get it now. Because like people like Guy Swan, for example, you
Mhm.
know, like unfazed by like anything that happens with Bitcoin. Um, but also like isn't clout chasing and like, you would think about it, it's like, you know, Guy Swan, it's like that's like one of the people in Bitcoin that everybody should know.
Yeah,
Um,
he's probably one
and
of the contributors to people knowing stuff in general.
yeah, and like I feel as though it's like part of, I mean, it's a good personality trait on his part, but like other people would be flaunting that
Mhm.
clout that he has. And, um, but I look at people like that as like, okay, these are like builders. Even like Adamo, uh, you know, that like his demeanor hasn't changed at all since like from the bull market to the bear market. Um, saying like Preston Pish is a good one. Um, but like just seeing these people that are like never too high, never too low. Um, and it's like I think that's where you like the most proper place to be when it comes to Bitcoin.
Yeah, and like there are people that are like intellectually interested in what's going to happen next. Like like Preston will be he'll be talking about how does this play out with bond market dynamics, and it'll be like, well, this is what I think happens over time, but like we have to game how other people act. And like it's really interesting that like I think that like when people are just intellectually like drawn to the thing, it's easier to stay even keel because the thing itself hasn't changed. There's just the price and the hype over there has kind of changed too.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's the biggest thing is like you know because I think I've had family ask because like I said 3 years ago I was like blah, that's all I was like telling everybody and like um and they're like, oh, are you still interested in that? And I'm like, oh yeah, like they're like, not as much as before. I'm like, oh no, like even more.
Yeah,
I
like
like
it's definitely.
it's like I'm more of a maximalist, Bitcoin maximalist now than ever before. I'm just like, no, like I don't know. I just the thing hasn't changed, and I'm just enthralled by it, but I just don't have to like I don't know. It's just weird. It's a weird moment like this. The
Yeah, I think too, like at least for me, after like COVID happened, and like you have so many conversations with family members about other things that are not Bitcoin that maybe feel obvious to you. Not handicapping what anybody did or how anybody felt about it, but there were certain conversations I had where I was like, oh my God, do these people not like watch what happens in movies even?
mm-hmm.
And then you're like, well, I can't get people to see my point of view about this. It's like, well, then how am I going to teach them about a still to the public obscure financial asset that solves a problem that like normal people don't really know exists? I mean, and it's been good for me and my family in terms of savings and da 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 da. But you when they're not interested enough to find out things that directly affect them, then it's hard to be like, well, here's another thing that you definitely haven't been interested in, but the answer is this for sure. You know what I mean? So
Yeah. Yeah, it's like well they just don't I don't know. I mentioned this on the podcast recently, but I was like, it's just people don't like. I love how right now we have this moment in time where there's a large group of people that are just hoping that you conveniently forget the like how naive or not naive, but well, I guess naive is a word. How naive they were, over the last couple of years. Where people are like coming back to the real world, and it's like, oh, like I had, like someone that would only meet me in like open parks, you know, like so we're like having business meetings by like swing sets. Um, and and
Which
then like,
probably has way more germs in terms of it being a swing
oh,
set than
a
like
thousand times more
it's
germs
just
than
like booger central.
it's like unreal. And then and so then we were like setting up a meeting, and I just was like assumed that's what it was, and like the response was like, oh, like no, yeah, like we can meet at the office, dude, like pandemic's over, and they were like, and
Because I got told a thing by someone.
I was like, I hate to break it. I was like, I hate to break it to you, but it's been over for me for like 3 years. Like it's like I once once it wasn't rapidly destroying everyone. But anyways, I don't want to go down that route. But yeah, it's just it is like, you're like, do I have this conversation? You also start to wonder, like, with the ETF possibilities, and like the more and more you think, I don't know, I'm like, I just don't know if that many people are going to be on base layer.
Yeah, I think that that's, and I've been thinking more about like UTXO sizes and stuff too, where it's
Mm-hmm.
like, the poor guy in Argentina trying to protect himself from inflation that's buying, $5 and $10 a month. If those transactions start being $5 and $10 a transaction, like in a way, he's kind of got nothing unless he can find a low fiat environment to consolidate. I think you're right. I mean, at least there is the base layer, but I mean, I don't even think that Lightning's going to be enough for everything, but I don't know those pipes as well as what I think I know about the base layer of Bitcoin.
Yeah. And I just, like, honestly, I didn't know much about what a UTXO was. Um, but so I was like actually texting with Shinobi. I was like, all right, I'm a dumbass. So walk me through this. And like I kind of gave him my thinking, like this is what I think it is. Where am
Mhm.
I wrong? And so from what I understand, like when you send a transaction on and it goes through the blockchain, that creates one UTXO, which is the output where those where the Bitcoin now reside.
And then like a
And
change one,
what's that?
and like your change too, right? I clearly am like need to be testing Shinobi about this too. But like if I have one giant a one Bitcoin UTXO and then I send you a tenth of a Bitcoin, I send you a tenth, and then the change, the point 0.9 goes
Becomes
into.
a new, yeah, I think it becomes a new
So
UTXO.
someone can't steal my point 0.9 because I revealed my key to send.
Yeah. Um, and so basically I was like, what I figured out, the very caveman layer of understanding, is that it would be better to move things in larger quantities um to a wallet. Like if you're moving it off of an exchange to a wallet, it would be better to do that in in greater sizes, because like you said, if somebody's DCAing $10 a day or
Mhm.
$10 a week, and that's automatically going to a cold wallet, then all those UTXOs can't be combined. Like you could send all of that Bitcoin somewhere,
to
But
another address, but you're
yeah,
paying for the data, and there's like 10 pizza slices worth of data as opposed to one big pizza slice worth of data.
yeah, and like you could where so like all of uh, technical people listening are probably like just like killing us because they're like, what the hell?
Oh,
I don't
absolutely. They're
but
like, this guy doesn't even know his lighting is
yeah,
horrible.
I know, and he's in Hollywood. Come on.
No, he's not
Um,
anymore.
uh, but yeah, so it's like a UTXO is the information that goes on the blockchain. And the more UTXOs you have to pull together to reach an amount. So, you might have one Bitcoin on a cold wallet and but that's made up of like, you were piecemealing and kept sending it from the exchange. So it could be made up of like 100 UTXOs. And now all of those have to fit onto the blockchain. So you're going to be competing and paying higher fees, which is what I think the way it was described. And then, anyways, yeah. But if you had everything sitting there, moved it all one whole Bitcoin to your wallet, you would have had, um, one UTXO with one Bitcoin on it. And then in the future, if you want to send that out, you could do it on one UTXO and not have to really compete for the block space.
Yeah, it's like every UTXO to you're describing it with bytes of data. You're like this one, and you're paying by the byte of data on the blockchain. So if you're like it's almost like a word count. You're like, I'm going to transfer this one and this one and this one and this one over here. And then it's like, okay, so that's more words, bytes of data, not words, obviously. But if you're just transferring the same amount of Bitcoin, but it's all from one place, you're only describing that it's from one place and one address.
Mm-hmm.
So because when you look at like if you go to like mempool.space, that
Mm-hmm.
shows the price per byte or k byte. I can't remember which it is because I'm not as technical as I should be. You can see that like, oh, the average transaction costs, $2 right now or $4 right now. Like during the ordinals, it was like really expensive. And so like if an average transaction costs like $10 and you've been moving it in $10, I should be just saying sats, but you
Mm-hmm.
know, $10 increments that you're DCAing in, then like every time you want to move one of those $10 increments, you're paying $10 per transaction. It's a little bit different because you're squishing them together, so it's not like one to one. But
Mm-hmm. But yeah, you're still paying for that space.
yeah,
Um, and yeah, so that like kind of was alarming to me. Um, and then like I actually the mining pool that I use, I was like hitting them up. I was like, hey, was like, do you guys have, because you set it up to like whenever it hits a certain threshold, it just sends it to whatever address you want it to go to.
mm-hmm.
And I was like, do you guys like are transactions get I was like afraid the transactions were gonna get stuck, because there's like 200,000 unconfirmed transactions.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Um, but they were like, no, 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 like you get through on standard fees. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. Uh so and I did see that did work. Um so yeah, it's just I guess it's back to normal and like those 200,000 unconfirmed transactions, maybe they'll just sit there forever. Um
Yeah, they're probably really low fee kind of
like
thing.
yeah, they've been sitting there I've checked the mempool probably a couple times a month, and ever since the ordinals thing, it's been like 200,000 unconfirmed transactions sitting there. Which like talk about like people that are annoying, like Udi whenever he was like, we broke Bitcoin, and it's like,
No.
no, you didn't. And like I at the conference, first of all, I was at the conference doing like basically media stuff um for Movies Plus, but like you gotta like I was walking through the main stage area when he was on stage, and I was like, oh my god, like it just made my blood boil. And I have like so little respect for someone like that that is just championing. Did I say that right? Champ
No.
championing championing champion championing um all this garbage and just like he's one of those people that's like straight clout chasing.
Oh,
um
absolutely. And he's like malicious. It's almost like telling people to keep their money on exchanges.
yeah,
I'm like, you know, I mean, anybody can lose their keys, but the odds of getting rugged by someone else that has your money is a lot higher than, you know,
yeah,
if you were a 16-year-old high school boy and you got somebody's phone number, you wouldn't lose those digits. You
yeah,
know, it's not that hard.
yeah. And like he he just reeks of someone who's never been good at anything in his life. So it's like you can tell when somebody like a lot of people they find that thing, and it's like, oh, you're really good at that thing, and then over time you figure out the social dynamics of like, oh, like I don't just flaunt it and be an arrogant asshole, or like how to like kind of handle that attention. And he does he does not handle that. So I'm like, I don't think uh I don't think he's been through this before.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I get the vibe of like some of those people that take improv classes for like 25 years and are maybe not going to break and be on VH1 Spotlight Comics or anything.
Mm-hmm.
I went to a wedding and this woman that got married, she forced her improv class on the entire audience of the wedding. And I get like
Oh,
kind of just that vibe, like we're the guys, we're doing the thing. What we're gonna do is simple, but what we're gonna do is amazing. And like
oh,
it's just right to the
oh,
bar. Me and my cool uncle were at the bar.
oh my God. It makes me think of like Michael Scott.
It was
Like
very loud.
like boom, boom, boom. um I I oh yeah, I never wanted to do like I remember doing a thing. I was probably like 11 years old, like 10 years old or something. Family came over for like a birthday party and like my sisters were like really into musicals, and so we were like rehearsed this like musical to like perform, for like the aunts and uncles. And I remember like doing it, and I was like, "Yeah, I don't think we should be fucking doing this." Like, like as it was happening, I was like, I was like, so I powered through for my little sisters because I was like, they think it's fun, but like I didn't realize like all the rehearsal we did of it and like practicing, I was like, this is gonna be amazing, and everyone's gonna love this. And
You're like, oh, as soon as you get
yeah,
out there.
so it's this like weird moment because like I look back on it of like I was like I cherish that moment with my little sisters, you know, but also simultaneously as it was happening, I was like, boy, oh boy, is am I gonna be really embarrassed looking at these VHS tapes later?
For sure.
I
Just
mean,
learn about objectivity in that one moment.
yeah,
Like,
it was just like, whoa, like, and and I know my one sister is a loyal listener, so I know she's going to be listening and probably laughing. She might not remember
like that
even the
was a
thing.
great show. You were okay. I was amazing.
She's like, we carried you through the performance. It was you. It was yeah, one of those like lines in the sand as you're growing up where you're like, "Oh, I'm too old for this."
Like
You
that.
know, it's like and like you didn't know it until it happened. I mean, there's like so many parts of life like that where you're just like, "Oh, yeah, I'm too old for this now." Like it's mine was in college. I uh I did 5 years of college, not because I'm an idiot, but because I wanted to play hockey longer. Um,
Nothing wrong with that.
no, and I was in no rush, and also, um, I was doing like media degree, but I had to like I also had like a minor in film studies, so you know, I had some extra courses, and I could have really crammed it in and done four, but I was like, I remember in like my sophomore year, I was like, or I have enough eligibility to play 5 years of hockey. I'm gonna do that. Um, so anyway, so I went through 5 years, and then that summer after I graduated, I started working on movies, and all my teammates, like I was the pit hockey captain, I was the ringleader for all the nonsense that we got into, and they all came back to school, and it was right before I was home for Labor Day weekend from working on a movie. And they were like, dude, you're coming home for Labor Day weekend. We are going to party like it's last year. And I was like, yeah, let's go, and I was going to come down the whole weekend and just like we were going to lose our minds. I was like, we're going to make all the freshmen buy us meals and we're getting so jacked up tonight, blah, blah, blah. And, and I'll never forget showing up University of Pittsburgh. If you've ever been there, it's like it's a city school.
Hmm.
It's like a neighborhood of Pittsburgh, and you're just like in these old dungy like damp houses. And I'll just never forget like going in and like going to the basement, and I was like, this basement smells like piss. And like, did these always smell like this? Like I didn't think, like I was just kind of confused. And then I was like watching everything happen around me, and I was like, I think I'm done with this phase of my life.
Retired from partying.
Yeah, at least like college partying, maybe I can go party in different. I was like, this is weird. And then my biggest one was I was sitting there and I just go like, I'm like, uh, there was this like group of girls there that was like talking to a group of us, and I was like, oh hey, I was like, what year are you guys? And they were like, oh, we're freshmen. It's their first year of their first week of college. So first of all, in my mind, I'm like, these girls are like 18 years old and I'm like 23. That's that is a weird moment. Like if they're 24 and I'm 29, that's an okay age. But like, so I was like, and I just said, oh, what high school did you go to? And they told me the high school, and it was the fucking high school that my brother was the physics teacher at.
Oh no.
And I was like, "Oh, um, did you take physics?" And they were like, "Yeah, why?" I was like, "Did you have Mr. Tusick?" And then it clicked in their mind. I was like, "I'm his brother." And like they were like, "Oh my God." And like running around, they're like, "Mr. Tusick's brother's here." Blah, blah. And I was just like, I literally was like, "All right, like
Yeah,
I'm
good
out,
night.
guys." Like I told my teammates, I was like, I gotta go. It was 11 o'clock on Friday night, and I was
That's like
planning
what
on.
time? And what time did you get there? Like 10:55? It's like I
No,
can't
I think I
party.
got there around like 8.
Okay, at least
Like
you
I
were.
got there because I was like, oh, I'll hang a little bit before the party. But like the party didn't pick up probably till like 9:30, 10 o'clock. And you're right, I didn't last long. And it was like 11 o'clock. And I was gonna spend the whole weekend there. Like I had packed stuff in my car to like spend the weekend. And I was just like, hey guys, I gotta take off. And they're like, really? I was like, yeah. It was like kind of like in old school with Will Ferrell. I was like, I gotta go like Home Depot tomorrow, maybe Bed Bath and Beyond. Like, I don't know if we'll have enough time. Um, it's such a good line. Um, with a wild cherry Pepsi in his hand. That's my favorite part of that scene.
Good movie.
Um, so yeah, I don't know how we got down that tangent, but just those random moments where you're like, oh, I've outgrown this.
Yes. And you can't
And
go back ever.
no, it's once you go through, there is no like it's one of those, it's one way doorway. Um, and maybe like part of that is where I'm at in Bitcoin. I guess, is like you got through. It's like the I don't know. You got through the like crazy. This is new to me. Blah blah
Hmm.
blah phase to now being like, yeah, like that's like I look back at like my earliest interviews. And I'm like, that's so embarrassing. I look back at starting a podcast. I'm like, oh, that was so stupid. Why would I start a podcast? Like the last thing this world needs is another Bitcoin podcast. Like
But here you are.
I know this is like episode 112. Um and like yeah, but like that's why I pivoted, So it's funny. Like if you know that guy Hodl Magoo, like he's said it so many times. He's like the last thing Bitcoin needs is more podcasts.
Oh yeah, I love his chats, and he's like one of the only people that'll criticize people that are like untouchable to criticize. He's fun.
Oh yeah, he's the best. It's such a breath of fresh air. Um and but yeah, yeah, he talks about it all the time, like just different things. But I've seen him multiple times reply to people when they're like, "What does Bitcoin need for like the future?" And he's like, "More podcasts," Like, um, and I'm sorry if you're starting a Bitcoin podcast or whatever.
Oh, fun.
Um, it's funny because there will be I have an ad at the beginning for Spotify podcasts. How easy it is to start one. Um, and I guess this is my disclaimer for that is that if you're going to start one, make sure it has before you do it, what's your unique selling proposition?
Yeah, you have to have point of view.
Like
Like,
what's the difference between you and like are you going to read articles? No, that's what Guy Swan does. Okay. Um, you know, Preston has like the macroeconomic view of Bitcoin and how it relates to like the current markets and everything. Then you have like Daniel Prince is kind of like the like wide range interviewer.
yeah, and he's in sort of like religion, philosophy, esoterica kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah, and it's like okay, so that's his base, and he basically owns that. And so you just look around, and you're like, that's why I got to like the point where I was like, why am I like gonna interview someone that like it's gonna end up being the same interview that the other places did? And I was like, whatever, it's just gonna be me.
Well, I think your niche too is like you are like kind of more of a normal, accessible family person, like we were talking about before. Like when you were talking about putting in minors and stuff, I was like, oh, I'm interested in how he does it because it's like figure you do a good job, but like you're not somebody that's just been working on minors for the last 5 years, and you're like, oh, I'll just make an oil bath and heat my
Yeah,
water like tomorrow, and it's like, well, that's great,
yeah,
but like I have like a bag with some hammers and screwdrivers in it for my tools. Like, what do I do? And like, if this guy does okay, like maybe I got a shot.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
And like, it seems like the new Bitcoin, some of the people that just want to start a podcast, it's like it's almost like when podcasts first got popular and it was like, well, I'm starting a podcast. Like, well, what's it about? It's like, well, it's about movies we like and comics and TV shows. And it's like, oh, so it's just about you, but you don't even know what you're about.
Yeah,
So yeah,
yeah,
and I mean when you do stand up too, like I mean even when you take classes, they'll be like, well, what's your point of view? And then like the new people, and I mean even me when I was new, I was like, no, but like I just whatever's the funniest, and it's like yeah, but like if you don't have a structure to hang it on, there's no ist about it. Like when you write a screenplay, you have to cut the jokes that you like the best oftentimes because it doesn't work with the motif you know that you're trying to create, like, and it's for the same reason why if you're downtown at night and you see some, I'm just talking about comedy because that's what I know. If you see a comedy show and there's a sign that says the best sketch comedy show in the city, you're probably like, that's nothing. But if they're like sketches about and like, something that about Star Wars or like weird Babylon 5 sketches or like whatever, then you're more likely to come just because there's specificity to it, it's like, oh, how are they going to send that thing up, as opposed to just we claim to be funnier than everyone. So yeah,
Hmm.
I totally agree with you. You have to figure out like what your niche is and like how it's reproducible too. It's not just like I've got the best one episode idea. Again, it's just like, well, that was great, but now what?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good angle too, like the comedy, like you were saying with the like the sketch comedy where you're like, oh, it kind of makes you think about how like often people will be like, oh, so and so is so funny. They'd probably be so good at stand up. And you're like, eh. Like it is an art form and it is so more complex than they even understand. And I still fight that in my mind. I'm like, I should just go to an open mic and just murder. Like I'm just gonna crush it. Um, and then I know that it would not go that way at all.
Well, when you want to write your 3 minutes, we'll work on it. It'll be good.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you have to expect that it won't go well, but you still have to believe in what you're saying. And like if the world needs more good podcasts. So like if somebody's got a really good idea and they're like, no, like in a way, it's almost like if somebody wants to do something like that, I don't know as much about entrepreneurship, obviously, as you, but certainly like trying to be a comic or doing something where you have to stand out. It's almost like everybody's like you can do whatever you want to do, and like that's great, and that's something that I should tell my 9-year-old boy who goes between wanting to be a cop and well he told me the other day he wanted to be a cop, but we're going to go in a canoe and that's going to be good because he's going to learn about being on water and in submarines to chase criminals. So
Yeah.
like at that age I can be like you should do what you want to do. But if there's like an 18-year-old that like wants to be in Hollywood and move there with no money and no prospects, I would be helpful to them, but at the same time I'd be like, okay, so here's the horrible things about it, because if they can't mentally get over these are the problems to be solved, and if they can't do it from their couch, then it's like, well, I saved them a lot of time. Like I'm
Hmm.
not like a horrible, discouraging person. Like, well, my daughter's in film school. You're gonna hate it. But
Hmm.
like you're in a serious talk. It's like, well, I did this for a really long time, and this was my angle, and this is why it was a good or a bad idea. Like, what's your thought? So yeah, I agree with you about the podcast stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just and like I remember, I don't know, there were like people I like knew from high school or whatever. They were like, oh yeah, we like when they found out about the Bitcoin podcast, they said, oh, me and so and so, like we started up a podcast because like we were just gonna like record our conversations. I was like, yeah, cool. Um, and then you find out that maybe you're not as interesting as you think. I don't know. Like I'm not
Yeah,
claiming. By the way, I'm not claiming to be interesting. Um,
but you've
but
made a lot of episodes, which is more than many can say.
yeah,
That's
and
the
I
thing
mean,
about consistently putting a thing out in the world. And even when they describe their podcast to you, they're like, we made a podcast and we talked. And you're like, and they're like, we did it.
and then
Like,
we laughed, man. Like we were telling stories, and you're like,
yeah,
if this is a podcast aimed at the group of people, the 200 people that went to your elementary school, then you're gonna kill it.
yeah, they all know the fourth grade that was taught by Mrs. Williams.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You're just like, which is really funny because I'm like, I live in like a small town now, and like my son's friend from school who like we become friends with their parents. Uh, the wife was like, she's like, I was just wondering, like, we have such a small school. She like graduated. Her and my wife went to the same high school, not at the same time, but they both graduated with like close to 800 people or something. So they're like used to this massive number, and they were like, "Are these boys gonna be like just trading girls?" Like, I was like, I don't know. Like that's a little bit down the road, like, but it is small town USA, so we'll see.
Yeah, everybody knows each other's stuff.
Yeah, Yeah.
Ours is pretty small too. It's I don't think it's as small as yours, but like there's like 8,000 in the city, but the school's kind of big. And it's just so great. It's great to be able to like I go downtown and sometimes I've made friends with the retired morning show radio broadcaster who's like 70 years old.
Oh, that's
And
awesome.
and now like I'll go downtown and he's just always there and I'll be like walking on the street and he's like, "Paul, how's it going?" And then like that's kind of it because it's not an exciting story for the podcast that I'm starting. But yeah, it's so much better than it's kind of like you're talking about in college. College is great when you're in college and then you get past that stage. And I loved being in LA and doing the thing and like, but then you've got a kid and then the world starts changing and you're like, maybe it's nice to have a basement where I can put stuff. And maybe it's nice to have relationships that I want to continue and it's not just for work. And yeah.
Yeah, like where it's not like because I'm really hesitant now. Like when we moved and we're making like new friends and stuff in this area, like I don't even want to talk about what I do because I'm just like, I mean, it sucks because it's one of those things that like people just are like, oh, hey, where do you work? You know?
Mm-hmm.
And then for
Yeah.
me, I'm like, well, like this is gonna be really hard to explain. You know, like started a streaming platform to fight for free speech, but I sell movies and I also do a Bitcoin podcast. Does that make sense? They're just
And they're confused and you're like, don't worry, I'm figuring out a way to maximize energy and efficiency with the Bitcoin mining program.
which is like it's funny because like I had to I had to reframe my mind like three times today during the workday. I went from a conversation, it was movie related, um, talking about like just with Movies Plus in general, one of the partners with Movies Plus. Then the next conversation I had was with an oil and gas provider for Bitcoin mining. And then right after that was a conversation with filmmakers about a film that I'm a producer on and like the artwork for it. And I just told them at the beginning, I was like, I gotta give me a second here, guys, because I gotta get my bearings. I was like, I am all over the place today. Um, so I was just like I was talking about like, MCF, like the amount of MCF that, be able to pump out of a well and all that kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden I'm talking about like, so should we put like all the actors on the poster or just the lead or you know
That was like my least favorite thing. Like I remember getting hired to write like a Bible for a TV show. And then it was like they were trying to sell the show and it was like I was hired just to write the Bible, but they were like kind of like young kids too. So I was trying to be helpful. And they're like, what about this character design? And I'm just like, I've never drawn anything in my life. Just like
like
and you don't want to go like and so you immediately it's like well I don't have an opinion like you can't do it because you're like producing the movie but
yeah.
you're like oh I'm not the expert on it so I don't and then you look at the pictures and you're like well clearly this one's horrible and then you've got to
Yeah,
like you're like god damn it.
yeah. It becomes then becomes a thing. People don't now. This wasn't the poster that I was talking about, but we have an original coming out, and it's a short. I think it's coming out Sunday about nanotech and um like nanotech and it like hijacking your brain. Um, and it's called Dust. In that one, like I actually was working on the poster with, I mean, the filmmaker, one of the directors is a partner in Movies Plus. So, like, obviously, like I'm close to that project. And, it's weird. Like, I can, I was like, let me take a stab at the poster instead of like hiring someone out. And I was like, I actually kind of, I think I came up with something pretty decent. Um, and the directors like loved it. They were like, "Yeah, like this is great. We're gonna push this everywhere." Um, and so I don't know. Like sometimes those conversations are fun, but sometimes, I'm like, can you just do it? Like, can you do the thing? Like
Yeah,
like, can it just be done so that I don't have to be involved? Um, which, by the way, I don't know if you know this, that so the film has it. Did you ever hear the streamer named Sneeko?
I have not heard of a
Okay,
street
don't feel
sneaker.
bad. I mean, it's one of those things. I feel like the Gen Z or whatever that's behind us, they're like, "Oh yeah, that guy's like huge," and I'm like, "I don't know who the fuck that is." Um, like it'd be just somebody that like picks their nose on like YouTube and they're like famous to like a subset of 18 to 20 year olds. Um, but anyways, he like has a I mean he has a huge following. Um, but like nobody our age is gonna know who he is, probably, or very few people. But anyway, so he actually is the lead in it. Um, and it's pretty cool. I'm not quoting the premise correct, but yeah, it's basically uh like nanotech, um, where this stuff called dust in the future. It's like a dystopia, like futuristic city. Um, and like if you take this drug, it like hijacks your brain. Um, and basically like the whole like uploading your consciousness and blah blah blah. And, so it's really interesting. But so people should check that out. Also, get a Bitbox O2 hardware wallet while you're at it. Um, I get my mid podcast read out of the way. Um, it's contractually obligated to mention them at the beginning, in the middle, and the end. Um, although the Bitbox, they're like so lax about like the podcast, because I was like, "Oh, do you have a script?" Like, and they were like, just say whatever you want." I'm like, "All right."
It's a public service not to keep your coins on an exchange too. So really,
That's the way I see it. Um, so
I
yeah.
have some coins on an exchange, and your Bitbox readings were one of the things that guilted me.
Oh,
And
really?
yes, I was just like, oh,
He's right. He's right. I should take them off. I have zero coins on exchanges. Like
that was good.
I drained it. That's why the other thing too with mining at home, like it's moderately profitable at the moment with my, commercial electric rate of like 12 and a half cents per kilowatt. It's like, barely profitable, but I just look at it as a DCA machine.
Yeah,
Like
and it's not uh, no KYC too.
no KYC, which by the way, I always say, I'm like, my, I fully intend on paying all the, um, as much as it's annoying. It's like the best case scenario is that I'm paying capital gains tax on,
Yeah.
all these, on all the coins. The reason, there's people that are like no KYC because they want to like, I don't know, I guess avoid paying taxes. I don't know. Um,
I think people are also no KYC because they're like, well, if we have to eat the bugs and there's a guy that'll sell a cow for Bitcoin, I don't want to sell government Bitcoin for my illegal cow.
yes, that is where that's where I'm like, okay, this is for apocalyptic world,
Yeah.
you know, just in case, um, you know, if if things get like so like crushed that people are scratching and clawing for everything. It's like all that data is like out there.
Oh, absolutely. But like, if you think that world's coming, shouldn't you also be lifting weights or taking
Yeah,
Taekwondo? I mean, I
yeah.
do kind of think the world's coming, so I'm being slack in my Taekwondo, but
I've thought about like Krav Maga.
that would probably be a better one. Because isn't
Pro-
that one meaner?
yeah, that one you like beat the shit out of people.
Yeah.
Um, it was funny because I saw these Krav Maga signs around town, and I thought somebody was like a huge Trump supporter because it
Oh, because it said macaw.
yeah. So it had Krav. It was like a yard sign, so it looked like a political sign, and it had KRAV at the top and then MAGA underneath. And so I was like, oh, somebody with the last name Krav is
Those guys crave MAGA.
yeah, like they crave.
Crave it.
They just want it pumped into their veins. And and it turns out no, it's just a Krav Maga class. Um but uh but yeah, that I did like it's funny how Bitcoin does change you in that way. Like I was slacking in my physical fitness. Um and I'm like by no means uh in great shape, but I'm exercising every day. Um
I have been as well. And
and
it's like the
and
peer pressure.
yeah, yeah, and it's like but like the good thing is they're not like some gym bros. They're like, dude, do it so that your muscles are freaking huge. Like they're just like, no, it's like we'll help you have like a better life.
Yeah. They're like, don't you owe it to yourself and your family? If you can put aside time to do this thing for your horrible boss or the task you don't want, can't you do some kettlebell swings?
Yeah. Yeah, like my and I tell my wife, I'm like, hey, look, like I still want to look good for you, babe. But the reason I exercise is so that I don't die while shoveling the snow. Like that's sadly the age that I've reached. I'm not old, but I am 37. And
Okay.
you're like, oh, okay, yeah, like I'm probably never going to be in the shape that I was, when we got married or when I was a senior in college and just, you know, like in incredible shape. And still, that's another thing that baffles me. I know the math behind it as to how this was possible, but like I would tell my wife, I'm like, I don't understand. Like I was, because like when we started dating, it was after college, and you get that like new relationship weight, and then like I
Oh yeah.
started to like have to like, and I was like, I never like, I was like, I had like pudgy periods like growing up, but like then once like hockey took fold, I was like, I was fine. It's like I never like, what is this? I used to like consume with me and my teammates. I would tell you the story. It was like me and my teammates would go to the pizza place on campus at 3 o'clock in the morning after being out all night drinking a few beers. And then we'd each get our own pizza. You get a whole pizza for $5 at 3 o'clock in the morning. And so like everybody in the whole college was there. Like NFL players that like if you're an NFL fan, you'll know of. I would see there. Um, and we'd each eat an entire pizza. And
And
at three
go to
o'clock in
bed
the
right after eating a pizza.
yeah, and then just fall asleep and then like wake up and be in incredible shape. And now that doesn't happen anymore.
No.
Um, but like I am fascinated by the way it affects your nervous system. Because I think it like exercising is like really good to like mitigate like anxiety and
Oh, absolutely.
all that kind of stuff. And like I don't think enough people really appreciate that. Um, People should do that instead of taking medicine.
Oh yeah,
Um,
I keep a kettlebell by my desk and like when I get too stressed out from work, I'll just do it a little bit. It's
Really, that's a really good
yeah.
idea.
I got like a yoga mat right next to it. Oh, it's not that bad. It's better than just being angry and like yelling at somebody in a chat,
Yeah, and like
or being professional.
it's like I feel like when your blood pressure goes up, not because you're physically exerting yourself, that's not good.
It's your body trying to destroy itself to send a message to your brain.
your
It's
body,
like, no.
your body's like, I will take this, I will burn this mother to the ground. Like, um, it's really interesting point of view because this is basically what it's doing. I saw somebody like it fascinating. They said when you're running, you're the endorphins, it's like, of course you're on a runner's high because to your body, you just escaped death. Like your body thinks that you just outran like a bear to survive, like natural instinct, you know? So, of course, you're going to feel great. I should run more. I don't, running is the one that's hard.
Yeah, running is tough for me too.
It's just, it's hard to like, you know, because it takes so much time. I still like, I've been doing, I'll do like a minimum, like a solid, I try to do like a mile and a half on the treadmill, but like treadmill running isn't like real running.
No,
Um, it just gets your like oxygen moving and the blood pumping, but it
because you
doesn't.
can bounce up too easy, and it's like you're not really pushing yourself forward at all. It's like you can let the treadmill skip under you. Not like you're trying to, but that's just kind of what
It's
happens.
just, yeah, it's nature. Because then, like, I mean, anytime you like run on a treadmill for a period of time, and then you go and try to run outside, and you're like, oh, what have I been doing this whole time? This is not running.
Yeah.
Like running outside, you're like, oh, um, but it's just hard to do now. I'm like, and again, am I really trying to like be like shredded? Not necessarily. You know, okay, it gets the blood flowing. Plus, it's something that's like I can do that. Like I can just boom, do it, be done, and then get on to my other, you know, couple exercises and then get back to work. Um, and I usually, it's funny, you do that with the kettlebell, but like that's, I'll usually pick like, okay, I'm super anxious, so I'm gonna go exercise. Um,
It
my
helps.
my kids like to join, and my youngest, he for a while we still call it this, but whenever he was like little, he called it, he would say like he wanted to go exercise with me, but the way he pronounced it was apple size. So like I'll like walk down with like, you know, come down with just shorts on. I'm like, Daddy's gonna go apple size. Anyone want to join? You know, they come down, they like sit there with like the Bowflex, like, oh, you know, like
How strong I am.
I know. And it's like it's funny because they'll be like asking that question. I'm like, uh-huh, yeah, oh yeah, okay, Daddy can watch. You know, they're like, watch harder, Daddy. Like, okay, like I'm trying to watch as hard as I can.
And you're
Oh no,
maintaining the dad is strong while you're just like barely, yeah.
it's your. Do you have that with your son, like where they're just like they're like nonstop? And children, if you guys are listening in the future, I love all these moments, so I'm not complaining about you at all. But you will understand someday when you're a parent where you're just sitting there, like your kids, they're like, "Daddy, just like, did you see what I did?" And you're like, "Yep." They're like, "Did you see the whole thing?"
Oh
Like,
yeah. And then you've got to repeat what happened.
yeah. They're like, "Prove to me." Like they'll like put you on trial. They're like, "Did you see this, and this happen?" You're like, "I think so."
Mine did a thing one day where he was doing a dance and I had to copy it. And at first it was just like, okay, like we're waving our hands. And then he, but then it was like his crazy dance. And then he would just tell me that I did it wrong. But it was like 117 6-year-old steps. And he'd be like, okay, do it. And and then he'd be like, no, no, no. Like he was Bob Fosse or something.
Yeah, yeah.
Didn't you pay attention? And then finally he'll be like, okay, that's fine. My
we'll
God.
we'll settle for this garbage that you've called a dance. It is funny. They'll just sit there like, and they'll rattle off like 100 directions for something. Like my son, my both of them like it, but the oldest like is really into like he wants to make movies, you know. And I think I might have mentioned this on the podcast one time, but I really dug myself a hole. I could go super viral with these things, but I absolutely refuse to put their faces out there.
I get
Um,
it.
and but like so I used a green screen and like placed them in Jurassic Park, like in the movie, and like did like filmed it with like the right angles and like tried to mimic the camera movement and it took hours. I mean, it took like it was on a weekend, so like I wasn't ignoring work to do it, but like I was sitting there like working on it, and I think it took like 5 hours for what ended up being like a 15-second clip.
That's about
And
right though for
and
that level
then
of work.
yeah, I mean it was pretty like it was pretty intensive. And as soon as I was done, they were like, "Okay, can we do the rest of the movie?" I was like, "You don't
You're like
understand."
26 years old and you're trying to finish the masterpiece. And they're like, "Dad, can we stop?" You're like, "No,
You said
4,000 hours of production, one man show. I did it." It's like your rosebud at that point.
Oh man, I knew that I dug myself a hole because and then now like it's like they'll be like, "Oh, it's Saturday, Daddy. Did you remember?" And I'm like, "I I don't know what." And they're like, "You said earlier this week on Tuesday at 3 o'clock, you said that when it was the weekend, we could make the Jurassic World movie." And I'm like, "Yeah, I probably did say that at 3 o'clock on a Tuesday." Define movie, because like now they know like the green screen thing's not gonna be happening the whole time. But so I've like recreated and we've like videoed on like phones, you know, and I have this like gimbal thing that's real nice to like do like steady cam or whatever. And oh my god, it's just
Are you
but
watching it like taking like director's notes?
oh, I mean, I told my oldest, I'm like, you're gonna be a great director because he has 1,000 notes on what to do. And he knows exactly the way that it's supposed to play out. But also, it's what made me think of this whole thing was your son telling you all the dance steps, and you're like, that's literally impossible to follow.
Yeah.
Like,
It's all here.
yeah, they're like, your foot has to land here, but like do it in like this way, and then like your other foot has to like think about landing here, but then actually land here, and you're like, how do like this is impossible to like move.
I don't have a floppy 9-year-old body like you.
Yeah, like and then they'll be like, let's just run, and you're like,
Okay.
I can only go so far. Like I will eventually die. Shit. But yeah, it was funny. You meant whenever you had texted me about the parent thing, like of like the hard moments where you're just kind of like physically present, but not mentally present. Like I feel like not enough, like you said, I think, you're like not enough people talk about that.
Yeah. I mean, it was a good point that you were making about because you were talking about you were wasn't it the pool or something over the
Yeah.
weekend?
Hmm.
And then like you were just kind of there, and then you realized that like I don't mean to paraphrase for you on your own
Yeah.
podcast, but it was like you realized that you needed to be present. Yeah, like my kid is 8. I mean, sorry, my kid is 9. He's only gonna be 9 for like so long, and then he's just gonna be like a little teenage shitlord, and then it'll be over.
Yeah.
It's got to take advantage of it when it's there.
The most depressing statistic that I hope this isn't really true, but like I don't see why not. And there's no way to, I mean, I'm sure it's off by a little bit, but my one partner said he was like, by the time your kid turns 18, you will have spent 98% of the time that you're going to spend with them in your life.
God.
And I was like, why did you tell me that? Like that was not information I needed. Um, because you're just like, oh shit. Yeah, it's just gonna be bits and pieces after that. And like, um,
Getting a call asking for a check.
yeah.
I'll take you out to dinner if I could just make sure you're okay. Yeah.
And like, even the night, like I told my wife, I said the both of them will ask for like piggyback rides randomly. And sometimes I'm like, I don't want to give a piggyback ride right now, but there will come a day that they no longer ask for that.
Absolutely. And you won't know when the last one is.
That is the most brutal part of parenthood is you don't know. Like you're like, oh, I guess that was it. Like, my one son, I know, needs a little extra, snuggle time for bedtime. Sometimes it's like, God, yeah, like, can you just go to bed? But you're like, no, like that day will come,
Yeah.
and it'll just it'll just go, and you'll be like, oh, like, hey, don't you want to snuggle a little bit? Like,
I'll be like, oh, not so much.
yeah, they're like, yeah, I'm good, I'm
Well, and
good.
it's everybody's, oh, I work for my kids. I work for my kids. And then it's just like, well, if you don't pay attention to your kids, it's like, do you really?
Yeah,
Like the
yeah.
one of the best things I ever heard, I was an apartment manager in Los Angeles, and we had this maintenance guy. He was like 40, and he was just the hardest working dude. And he would run 6 miles a day before going to work. And then he would just work with his hands all day. And I was like, Isaro, like you have an incredibly physical job. Like, how do you do that? And he's just like, I have to for my kids. He's like, the doctor said from my heart, I need to do it. And I was just like, oh my God. I'm like, aren't you tired? He's like, of course.
Yeah.
It was just like the most like
He's like,
just
I'm fucking
genuine.
exhausted.
Yeah. Like that guy's the guy that cares.
Yeah, yeah. It's a brutal. Yeah, but you just, and that's what like I'm sure that part of like your move to Michigan had to do with where you're like, we could get some more quality time here.
It's a lot. Yeah. I have a special needs kid too. So like he's like in normal classes, but like there's some that's part of why I don't make a bunch of jokes on my Twitter account anymore, because then I'd have to like really explain like why, like when you have a 3-year-old that's doing all the other 3-year-old things, it's like very easy to be like 3-year-olds, man. But
Mm-hmm.
so like I didn't want to like out everything about him all over my
Mm-hmm.
Twitter account, just like how you didn't want to post the Jurassic Park photos.
Yeah, yeah.
And so like moving here has been great because it's like I'm near my family, and it's like a small community that like, they actually care about him being able to read, and like, we can get a tutor to come over, which is just like normal person stuff. But it's just so much harder in a city where like, just driving somewhere, you're like, am I going to find a place to park? And it's like 15 minutes extra just to put your car in a place. And it's just like those thousands of tiny cuts are like, they're not as bad when you're 20, but like when you've got a kid that, you're going to get 90% of the time, 98% of the time before they're 18 with, you don't want to be wasting time. So, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I love it that you live in a small town too. Did you say you have chickens too? Or
Yeah,
did
yeah. We have 10 chickens.
that's
Um, and they just started laying eggs like 2 weeks ago.
is this
Um,
the first year for chickens, or is this
mhm. Yeah, that's our first. I should post the picture on Twitter because going to your thing about like, oh, this is this guy that like, if he can pull it off, I don't know how I pulled this coop off, but I built the coop from scratch and just kind of winged it. Like did a little couple like like mock drawings, like, oh, I think I need this, this, and this. But like I got the base done. And then I was like, okay, the next thing it needs is walls. And there's gonna be a door here, and like just piece by piece. And somehow I was like, I don't. My wife always busts my chops about this because I'll like random things. I'll be like, I don't want to brag, but like what I did was pretty incredible. And like she's just like bust my chops. She's like, you say that all the time, and it's only between me and her, like because I'm not a braggadocious person to other people. Just be like, hey, babe, like I don't want to brag, but like, did you see how I just nailed that? Like I'm unbelievable at this one thing.
kind of
Um, and she's like, man, I'm so lucky that I got you. Like, what are the odds that but but yeah, so I built a coop, um, and then we we were gonna we were gonna get 6 chickens, and we went to Tractor Supply Co. to get chickens, thinking, oh, we'll just show up and get chickens. And they only had like one type, but we wanted like a mix of breeds.
Mm.
So we were like, oh, okay, we'll get three here and then we'll go somewhere else tomorrow and get three there. Um, and they were like, well, you have to buy four as a minimum for like agricultural laws or whatever, And I was like, all right, fine, we'll get four and we'll get another four of another kind, and that'll be eight. So then we go to the other store with not a Tractor Supply, different company, and they're like, oh, you have to buy six minimum. And
Just like really good negotiators.
I know. And I was just like, okay, yep, all right, we're getting six. And my wife wasn't with me for that one. I texted her, I said, they have a minimum order of six, so we have 10 chickens now. Um,
Were there space problems with that, with what you built, or was it fine?
no, it ended up being fine. Because I was gonna put up a stink if it was gonna be a problem, but I built it a little bit bigger than
That's good.
what I expected. And like the I also the coop I like lifted up. So like they say like basically the coop space, you do it based on per hen, and then like the run space is like double the space of the coop. Um, so I made the run space the like double the space of the coop, but then I also built the coop on a lift so that, like they can walk underneath it. So I was like, they've got like plenty of space. Um, but now like over the last couple of weeks, we just like open the door and just let them out, and they just like wander around. We have a couple acres, and they just wander around and eat the bugs and
That's great.
do their thing. And um, like last night, we were out shopping. Like, I mean, literally, like getting like chicken feed and random other stuff. And it was getting dark, and my one time was like, "Daddy, we gotta get home." Like the chickens need put away before it gets dark. I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot we left them out. Um, and so we, got home and they let them all. So they put them all. So all 10 of them were in the coop. Like they just found their way back, and they,
That's awesome.
do you have any?
No, I wish I did. Like the place that we got, you can't have it here because of like a local ordinance. But like near me, like I mean, we buy a cow, we got so like
Mm-hmm.
I'm in a little bit more. It's like a suburb, a subdivision inside of like a small town.
Mm.
Um, but like I'm totally jealous of it, and I'm totally jealous of like your waste stream too because I like to garden, and that would be so good for the plants that I'm growing. And
The waste stream. What?
yeah, the chicken manure. I mean, that's so
Oh,
good for your yard and for like as a fertilizer.
oh yeah.
To your point about like your kid, like talking about living in a small town, like the fact that you guys were out and your kids like, you got to put the chickens away. It's like that. It's like such a good like they see you build the thing and then they're like, oh, we've got to take care of this, and like you're already teaching like responsibility at that age. Like there's just so many more opportunities, I think, at least now, especially when like we can talk to each other over the internet, than like in a big city. Like we would have just been tiny packaged in an apartment, and you wouldn't be building a chicken coop there.
Yeah. Oh no, no, not at all. And like I even thought, like I told my wife, I said, I wonder if, you know, like if I could take a bunch of eggs to like the meat market, I wonder how much meat I could get like for a trade. Say,
Mm,
hey, like we'll give you, these eggs, if you give us like how much bacon or sausage would you give us? Um, and she was like, well, you're gonna need a bunch of eggs to like
yeah.
offset that price. I'm like, yeah, that's true. But like we should get like 60 eggs a week. Um,
Maybe you
but,
can sell some subscriptions. Like we buy an egg subscription. We
oh
get a
really?
we get a dozen a week from this dude. I think it lasts for 13 weeks. And then I don't know enough about chicken laying season to know if that's just like how he parsed it out or what how long
Mhm.
they'll lay. And then we get vegetables from him too. And it's funny because like now, like with all the stuff that's happening, when I talk to like a farmer, like for that to talk to somebody like that, it's like talking to a celebrity to me. It's just like,
Yeah,
oh, you do like real work in the world and you make it so that people can live. I'm like, tell me how you plant. And he's like, oh, you garden? And I'm like, yeah, like I'm growing blueberries. He's like, you need to acidify that soil. And I'm like, oh, tell me about that. And it's like,
yeah,
and it's yeah, like so maybe you can sell a dozen eggs, a week or something like that if you can easily reproduce that stream. And that might be easier because then, you get a neighbor that wants it or something like that. Put it on Craigslist.
yeah, yeah. That's really funny. Like how you said the celebrity, like they're like a celebrity because they are for me.
Yeah, you
I'm
have real skills.
like you are like, if this all goes to shit, you actually will survive. Like you know what to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I even thought about like, we have because now that we're like that, not all of them are laying, or they're not all laying like consistently or whatever. Because we're getting about 4 eggs a day out of the 10. Um, but I was like, oh, like it was this cool moment where like we got home from church and like I was like, oh boys, I was like, good, check the nesting boxes. They came back with they only had 2 eggs that day, and they were all gonna eat something else for lunch, and it was just kind of like a lunch of like, hey, like figure out what you can, and I was like, oh, make myself an egg sandwich. And, just crack the eggs, like wash them and then crack them, and made the sandwich, and I was like, well, that was pretty cool.
System works.
Yeah, like it's so now, but it's funny because the sovereignty now is pushing me to be like, okay, so I got the protein part.
Hmm.
Now I want a bread maker.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
it's like, why do I go to the store for bread? Like, that's stupid. I should just, I should just be able to make bread.
Yeah, my wife's been making bread a lot, and now she wants to mill her own wheat because she doesn't want to get whatever poison wheat or whatever is out in the
Oh
world.
yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know her specifics, but I believe her on what she's saying.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. And we have a bread maker, but she doesn't use it. She just makes it in a pan. So you might not be a bread maker away. I think she does focaccia a lot.
Oh yeah. I guess you could do that in a pan. I think my wife used like a Dutch oven one time to make rolls or something.
A lot of work.
I mean, I say one time. I'm like, she's probably done it a bunch.
That in aught six, we had those rolls.
Yeah, there's this one time I remember that I knew she did it, but she's probably done it so
She's
many
gonna be
times.
like, I heard your podcast. We have rolls like every Thursday.
Yeah, I know. The best part, the good news is I know for a fact that she does not listen to the podcast. She's like, you would think like, hey, like you support her. No, okay.
Like, I hear you enough.
Yeah. She's like, I like your tweets and everything from my Anon account. Okay. That's about the best I'm gonna get.
Well,
Um, but yeah. Do you want to? Did you want to keep going, or do you need to tap
um,
off soon?
yeah, it's a midnight. We should probably scoot. But
Um, well, we gotta. I mean, yeah, it's Thursday, so you gotta work tomorrow. Shit.
yeah.
Um, so the Antarctica stuff. Do you want to get into that, or do you want to save that for another one?
It's up to you.
All right, I'm fascinated. I want to at least hear some of your. So for those that, well, for those that don't know, nobody knew because it was just Paul and I talking at the beginning before we recorded. But we were talking about how fun um, Antarctica conspiracy theories are, and so you said you really like those. So what's your favorite Antarctica
I like
conspiracy?
the conspiracy theories about, I think his name is Admiral Byrd. And I wouldn't consider myself an Antarctica conspiracy theorist or anything, because you can just Google things and be like, oh, this guy's wrong. He doesn't know about UTXOs and doesn't know about annual bird. But so like there was like a military expedition of a somewhat famous um somewhat famous admiral, I guess. I think it was. And he led a unit into Antarctica around the 1930s. It was like, and they were attacked. And there's like all these weird rumors about like if they were attacked by aliens or they were attacked by like a break off German army. And like, but I mean, he had troops that came back and they were not alive. And he I guess, yeah, I don't know it super well, but if you look up conspiracy theories about Admiral Byrd, it's like there was some sort of weird battle that happened there. And there's all this like hollow earth theory and just like the craziest absolute stuff. And it's great fodder for at least fiction.
Yeah, it's it's really interesting. Like the flat Earth really like is so fascinating to me. Like, sorry, flat earthers, I'm not making fun of you, but like the thing that's really interesting to me is that there's a lot of logic to their argument. Where you're like, because it's like, first of all, as a Bitcoiner, don't trust, verify. Can I verify? Have I been around the Earth? In a spaceship? No. Um, have I been to Antarctica to observe that it is the island, that the continent that they say it is, and not an ice wall? No, I have not. Um, but there's also scientific experiments that you can perform to prove that the Earth is indeed round.
Yeah.
Um,
I think they're like communists or socialists. They're like, you're like, flat earth isn't real, it hasn't worked. They're like, they haven't done flat earth the right way yet.
yeah, you just gotta try it. If you do it the right way, it's gonna finally work. Um, yeah, that one's interesting to me, but I love to hear the stories. Like
I
I'm just
sometimes think that one is just people that are like trying to discredit just other people thinking outside of the box too. Like there has to be a contingent of just like, oh, let's post the craziest stuff here because some other people are talking about things that are directionally correct, and then so let's tar them with these ideas about.
I I do think that. I think I'm like, there's a reason that the conspiracy theory around the like flat Earth is allowed to propagate enough, because it's like it's so absurd that like if you come up with like, hey, I think these evil corporations are working together, people are like, oh, you want like a flat earther too? It's like, no,
Yeah,
no, no,
exactly.
no, no, like not at all.
It's just like in the press, like there'll be some news story, and then you're like, I don't, and like there's people that are like, I don't think we should be putting that poison into that forest or whatever, and then they're like, oh, these people are right wing, like they're like vaguely connect them to being like some sort of ist, and it's just like they're like, no, dude, we just don't want to put poison into this well, and they're like, well, you also in high school, you one time you wrote a symbol that, it's the same thing. I think
Yeah,
and people just don't pay attention enough to like they want to be told what to think about a thing instead of thinking about it for themselves,
yeah,
which is bullshit.
yeah, and that's like do you ever check the YouTube channel Y Files?
Mm-mm.
Oh, it is like one of my favorite. Like it's like a TV program. Like for the old people, it's a program. I was watching this program on the on the on the on the radio with the pictures. Um, uh, but like he'll debunk conspiracy theories, but then he'll like some things he's like he goes through. He lays the whole story out, and then you're like, and sometimes occasionally he's like, well, like that's we don't have an answer for this. um but it was funny because he did the moon landing episode recently, and he goes through, and you're like watching, and for like 30 minutes you're like, yeah, this moon landing was faked by Stanley Kubrick and it was filmed and blah blah blah. And then like he just like boom 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 like knocks them all out in a row. Um, and he doesn't always debunk. Like it's probably like 70% of the time he debunks, and 30% of the time he's like, we have no like pyramids, things like that. It's like he'll go into like those rabbit holes. But anyways, on the moon landing one, and this is where I'm at with the moon. It, he was like basically like, no, the moon landing wasn't faked, but he thinks that the the fake moon landing is allowed to propagate for a reason. And there's a lot of theories. Have you ever seen the theories of like they found something on the moon that like they don't want to disclose?
I mean, I would not be surprised if there was a lot of like at this point, like when the government talks about aliens, everybody's like, we don't care. We don't
Yeah.
believe you about anything right now. So yeah, and that could be the same with Antarctica. And I mean that could be the same with, various things and, structures that are like 5,000 years older than the Egyptians that are in Egypt. Like, because aren't some of those pyramids multi-thousand years older than them? Then
Well,
like the Mark Antony Cleopatra classic, you watch HBO on Rome, ancient
yeah.
civil.
So the pyramids with like archaeological evidence, like the ancient Egyptians found them and they were like, "Oh, we can make this a tomb." Like they did not, I mean, because so those structures definitely predate the ice age, and or like in the younger Dryas, if you're familiar with that, 10,000 BC. And like one of the most fascinating things was Graham Hancock took a guy who wasn't a big like Egypt person or whatever. I forget what his field of study was, but like water erosion and all that was like something he was like a big focus on. And he took him there. And he took him into like the Sphinx and everything. And he's like, first thing he was like, there's like water damage on these like structures, and like so it's like, okay, you tie that together with like there's an ancient flood myth
Mm-hmm.
for every civilization, ancient
Mm-hmm.
civilization around the world, all roughly dated to the same time. Um, the pyramids showing up on all these different continents, the way they line up, the fact that we can't replicate the technology to create them, um, and like the resonance within them, and like the way that like Tesla was experimenting with like frequencies on top of them, and it like it's just such a big rabbit hole, and you're like, oh, like we don't know anything. Like,
Yeah. And I think that people have like a knee-jerk reaction to go like it's either this or this. And I
yeah,
think that people should start thinking of things as info tiles, and then it's like assigning probabilities to them, and we can do it in normal person stuff. Somebody goes like, oh, that sports team that you like, how they're going to do this year, and you're like, well, if they don't have any injuries, I think they can make the playoffs, but if a couple people get hurt, I think it's going to be tough. And you basically said like, I've got 60% confidence they'll get in the playoffs with these, but like they're like, okay. So then somebody goes, okay, so 5,000-year-old pyramids that predate the Egyptians. And then they're like, I don't believe it, or for sure aliens. It's
yeah,
like, be as nuanced as your sports point of view, like have like a little bit of like discretion with your ideas and don't be locked into something.
yeah, yeah. That's a really good way to look at it, because like have the discretion that you have with your sports, your sports analysis, and instead of just being like so locked in, um, and yeah, it's really hard. I think I was like talking about it on podcast recently where I was like, it gets like to like think in that world, it gets a little it can be lonely because you're just like nobody else is thinking this way. Like nobody
Yeah.
else is.
And like it's okay to just not have an opinion about something too. Like
Yeah.
people are like, no or yes. And then somebody goes, well, do you think that this thing should happen politically? And I'm just like, I really haven't thought about that much.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that it's not important or whatever, but it's just like at some point, if we think that, well, these people, just like, oh, these people don't know anything about Bitcoin. Why do they have such an opinion on it? They should learn about Bitcoin and then they can have an opinion. And it's like, well, maybe that's me in some situations. And I think it's okay to have like the self-awareness that maybe you don't know as much about everything as everything else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we should peel that onion on like some of those ancient discussions next time on our version of protect your parks or protect our parks. Um uh but what do you think? I mean, we should do this as like a monthly hang.
Yeah, I'd love to hang out with you again. It'll be
Yeah,
fun.
I think it's fun. And I think it's a good change of pace for I think personally I just think that like the Bitcoiners need to hear other plebs out there. And it's like just being like, no, this is what we're doing. Like this is, this is the bear market.
We're normal people that are
We're
not going to a conference that's called Atlantis or something.
yeah, like we're just trying to figure it out, trying to figure out how to get some like, good healthy eggs and just like unwavered and stacking sats.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah, we'll have to do this again. And everybody, if you've done it before, you should take your Bitcoin off the exchange, put them on a Bitbox O2 hardware wallet. And I will talk to you guys later. Thanks for coming on, Paul.
Thanks for having me.